Hey everybody, this is the Marine. One thing that people realize when they first purchase or receive a hammock is that there's a little bit of a learning curve to it. Setting it up for the first time, especially hammock camping, can be very confusing. With a little bit of know-how and setting it up a few times, practicing, it really is quite simple. In this episode, we're going to look at the things you may need to know before you take it outside. Then we're going to look at the more popular suspensions and how to use them. And then lastly, when you climb in this piece of paradise, how to get the most comfort out of it, and more. When you first get that hammock that you purchase, there may be a few things you have to do before you take it outside to hang. I just got my hammock and the accessories and the suspensions that I ordered in the mail, and now I shall open it up and show you what I got. You want to do it ever so lightly because you don't want to damage the hammock. Okay. So first we have the hammock, and you can see that there's no continuous loops on there. Matter of fact, they're right here. So I'll show you how to put the continuous loops on the hammock. And also I ordered a structural ridge line, and that wasn't put on there, so we're going to have to put that on there also. And I got a ridgeline organizer, and that goes over the structural ridgeline, so I'll also show you how to get that on there. I got 2 carabiners, and I got a whoopee sling, and to attach the whoopee sling I have some tree huggers. Now tree huggers are tree straps with 2 loops on each end. And I also have a cinch buckle suspension. And also a daisy chain suspension. So what we'll do right now, I'll show you how to put the continuous loops on. So what you want to do is, on the end of the hammock is a sewn in chamber, about 3 inches. And you find the opening. This is my foot end, I got the gray one. So what you want to do is feed the continuous loop into that chamber. I like to put my pinky on one end of the loop and feed the other end through the chamber. It will act as an anchor point so it does not slip through. So this takes a little bit of time. You just work that continuous loop into that chamber, pull the loose end back, and then do it again. And there it is. So all you do is a lark's head, but before I put the lark's head on, I'm going to set it right now. I want to put on my ridge line. Find the loop there. Now when you put the ridge line on there, you want to put that loop on the part that's going towards the end of your suspension. And now, since I have this out, I'll put on my ridgeline organizer. This basically, you just feed it right through. If you have one. If you don't have one, then don't worry about it. Now to put on the other continuous loop. Find the end. Find the opening of that chamber. Some hammocks that have a bug net or something like Knotty Mods on one end, it's going to have a head end and a foot end. When in the stuff sack, you're not going to know which end is which. So you may want to consider having 2 different color continuous loops. I like to have a yellow on the head end and a different color on the other end. Now that I got it through, find the other end of the structural ridge line, and now put the structural ridge line in that loop that heads towards the suspension, and put the other loop around it in a lark's head. So now I'll put this back in the stuff sack. Now I have a double end stuff sack. On each end it opens up, and I like to keep my continuous loops out. Now the hammock is ready to be set up. If your hammock comes put together, then you don't have to worry about it. But it is good to know, you guys, if you want to change these continuous loops, now you see how easy they are to take off and to put on. And if you don't have a structural ridge line, you're going to order it later, you can see how easy it is to put a structural ridge line on, or a ridge line organizer. So now this is ready to go. Now if you have a whoopee sling suspension and it comes with 2 tree huggers, basically what you do, unravel it. We need to put on a tree hugger, and that's really easy. It's the same thing as a continuous loop. You just do a lark's head on it. Here's your tree hugger. Remember, a tree hugger has 2 loops on it. Tree straps only has 1. And the reason why the tree strap has 1, because it's for cinch buckles or for using knots on there. But with the whoopee sling, we need this loop on there to connect the whoopee sling. That's why we get a tree hugger on there. And to tell which one's the head end and the tail end that goes to the suspension, you'll see the whoopee sling, this am steel. So wherever the end comes out, this is a tail end. This is the tail end that will go through the loop of the tree hugger to create a lark's head knot. And you just have a lark's head on there, and it's ready to go. I like to keep my suspension separated from the hammock, because when camping, it seems like it always rains. You always want to keep your hammock dry, so when you pack it away, you do not want a wet suspension next to it or against it. If you are going to keep the suspension separated from the hammock, then you'll need something to connect the end of the suspension to the continuous loops, like some type of hook, either on a hook style of a cinch buckle or a whoopee hook on a whoopee sling. If you don't have a whoopee hook, and that would just connect on the continuous loop. And that's how you're going to hang your hammock. Otherwise, you'll have to use a carabiner in the same manner as a daisy chain suspension. A heavy steel carabiner from a hardware store will work, but I would suggest you get some type of a climbing carabiner made of aluminum that has a weight rating of 2,600 pounds and weighs only 21 grams or 3/4 of an ounce. You can buy these at a specialty store like REI, or from the cottage industry like War Bonnet Outdoors, Dream Hammocks, Hammock Gear, or Dutchware Gear. If your hammock comes with the suspension already connected to it, and if you want it separated, they are easy to remove. And if you want to keep the suspension connected to the hammock, that's okay. It makes setup a little faster and easier. But you are going to need a pair of carabiners to attach to the ends of the straps, so you can connect it to a tree or some type of anchor point. But you want to keep the suspension straps on the outside. Just wrap them around the stuff sack. Now the first thing you're going to need to do if you're going to use a tree for an anchor point is you have to make sure that the tree is not dead. Just don't look at the trunk, but you also got to look up to see if all the branches are dead. In late fall, winter, and early spring, when there are no leaves, then look at the end of the branches at the tips to see if there's any buds, and also if some of the bark has fallen off. Then the next thing you need to do is look up to see if there's any widowmakers. They're broken branches that have fallen off and caught by other branches, just suspending by other trees. It is just a moment in time before they will fall And you don't want to be underneath them when they fall because they will cause injury or worse. Now, depending on the length of the hammock, you want the distance between two anchor points, in this case trees, between 13 and 17 feet, which is 3.5 to 5 meters, which is equal to about 3 paces. 1, 2, 3. Now, if the distance between the two trees are farther apart, you'll need to take the anchor point that's connected to the tree and raise it as high as you can. To attach a suspension to the tree, you take the loop end of the suspension and you wrap it around the tree. Feed the other end through the loop. To make it easier to set up and take down, you may want to consider attaching a good climbing carabiner to the end of the loop. You'll want the loop or the carabiner that's attached to the suspension to be on the side of the tree where you first begin to wrap it around. Otherwise, it will put too much stress on the straps, which will cause damage or breakage. Not that side. This side. This way the pressure is around the tree and not on the connection point. Now again, if your suspension is not connected to your hammock, you will need to use some type of hook or a carabiner. Otherwise, you can use some type of knots. The two most popular knots are the Beckett hitch. So what you do is you bring the strap through the continuous loop, pull it tight, bring it over and pull the loop through and tighten. But what I like to do is make a long loop and just tie an overhand knot just so it doesn't slip. To unloosen, take that overhand knot out and pull, and you're off. And the marlin spike. Take the strap, you flip it over, you create a loop, then you flip that loop over onto the strap. You reach in, pull the strap through that loop. You take a stick or a toggle, you put it through that strap that went through the loop, and you tighten it down. You take the continuous loop, put it over. Now it's very important that the continuous loop is on the knot, not on the toggle or a stick. It has to be behind the knot on the strap. Now, user straps and knots are lightweight and inexpensive, but the cons are you have to untie them and retie them every time you have to adjust the hammock. Otherwise, suspensions like the daisy chain or the cinch buckle are the easiest to adjust. Hold the strap up, put your fingers on top, thumb on the bottom, and pull. I found that the cinch buckles from Superior Hammock are the easiest to use, even when the hammock is weighted. The whoopee slings are great, but they do have a learning curve. But once you figure it out, they are also simple to use. Now, the end where the cordage comes out of the whoopee sling, you pinch it right above where it comes out, and then you take the cordage and you just pull it, and that will tighten the suspension and raise your hammock. To loosen the suspension and lower the hammock, you go to the end that forms the loop to connect to the hammock, or in this case a continuous loop, and you take the cordage that's coming through the splice and you pinch the knot right behind it and you just pull. And that loosens the suspension and lowers your hammock. Now, when you go to hang your hammock, you really want to try to get that suspension at a 30-degree angle. A little trick is to put a little bit of weight in your hammock you take your finger parallel to the ground with your thumb up and you put it against the suspension. If the suspension touches the tip of your finger and the tip of your thumb, that's very close to a 30-degree angle. Now I know a lot of people like to hang their hammocks high off the ground, but the best way to adjust your hammock is to sit in it and keep adjusting the suspension until your feet are flat on the ground. The reason why you want to do this is it's easier to get in and out of your hammock. It makes it easy to take your shoes on and off. And the hammock is not just for lying in, it's also for lounging. And it makes an excellent chair for sitting. If you sit in your hammock, more than likely you're going to have the edge of the fabric or material pressing tightly against the back of your leg. After a short time, this will become uncomfortable. The wider the hammock, the deeper the seat will be. To alleviate this problem, you just fold the material over to make a half. Now you'll have a flat, comfortable chair to sit on. If you're going to use this for sleeping or taking a nap, in most cases you'll want the feet end higher than the head end. And that's because when you position more towards the head end, you'll find it to be more comfortable. Plus it'll help reduce calf ridge, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But a good starting point is to have the foot end about 6 inches or 15 centimeters higher than the head end. Now there's many ways to lie in a hammock, but the most comfortable position is to try to lie in it diagonally or asymmetrical. Most people, when they first start out, they'll jump in the hammock and lie symmetrical, straight up and down, which causes the pesky banana-shaped position. After a short time, this will become very uncomfortable, putting pressure under the legs and behind the knees and back.
I'm no banana.
If you're having the issue where the fabric of the hammock is causing a ridge and is putting pressure behind your leg, which is basically called the calf ridge, what you do is you lift up your leg and drive the heel into the fabric and push it to the other leg to remove it. But if you move around and it comes back, then you may want to raise the foot end higher than the head end, and that should solve the problem. Now the last thing I'd like to talk to you about, again, which I believe is the biggest problem, is that people will get a hammock that just does not fit them. They'll get that suspension at a 30-degree angle, they'll lie in it asymmetrical, they'll get this shoulder squeeze, or just can't get comfortable, the feet are hanging out. So they'll think, well, I'll stretch that suspension as flat as I can. They'll get it at a 5-degree angle. And what happens is there's 4 times the amount of pressure on the suspension in the hammock, which could cause damage. I'm sorry, you guys, but your hammock is just too small. Well, this concludes this episode. I hope you found it helpful and insightful. And if you have any questions or comments, please write them down below. I'd love to hear from you. This is The Marine. Thank you for watching, and God bless.